Hey everyone, Jay here with a quick message before we get into today's episode. We're super pumped that everyone is enjoying the show so far, and we know a lot of you want to see the photos that we talk about on air. So, we created a subreddit for our listeners, and that will be the new home for our photos moving forward. We hope this enhances your listening experience, and we look forward to building out and engaging with our community on Reddit, the place Hue and I both discovered our love for true crime. The link to our subreddit will always be in the show notes. And with that out of the way, let's start the show.
Welcome, everyone, to the Blind Judgment Podcast. If you are tuning in for the first time, my name is Hugh, and I research bizarre true crime cases and present them to my lovely co-host, who is coming in blind.
Aw, thanks.
So we start off each episode with a series of photos or clues that are somehow related to the case. And my co-host, Jay, will try to piece a story together with them. So I've sent you those pictures. Go ahead and take a look.
Yeah, so I'm trying to piece a story together, but I'm also potentially trying to guess what case you could probably be talking about. But I feel like I'm never, ever going to get it because, FYI, I suck at puzzles. But anyways, all right, I'll describe the photos. Okay, so the first one actually makes my heart very, very happy.
What is it?
It's the best university on the planet. It's the University of Texas
in
Austin. So very, very cool. Now I'm even more excited for this episode. Second photo is a picture of, it looks like a medical student and they're studying. They have an open book in front of them. The third photo is the opposite of studying. It looks like it's spring break on the beach and there are a bunch of kids just having a good time. The fourth photo looks like we're maybe still on that beach and now there's a lineup of women all in bathing suits, and they're all posing. So it looks like some kind of competition is going on. And then the last photo, of course, this is the curveball that you always throw me.
I always do.
It looks like it's a picture in the middle of the woods. There's a fire going, and there's a pot hanging over the fire. So it looks like some kind of campground, okay? So it looks like we're definitely dealing with some kind of college student. I'm going to assume maybe the college student is a man, and maybe he took a liking to some lady that he saw in a swimsuit competition whenever he was on spring break. And then maybe they hit it off and planned a trip to the woods where things maybe went a little south. So I don't know what case this could possibly be, but that's kind of the story I'm putting together.
All right, I think that sounds pretty good. Is that your final answer?
Yeah, it's my final answer.
Great.
Lock it in.
All right, you're locking it in. Sounds good. So let's get started on the case and let's see how close you were. So this week, we are covering the Mark Kilroy case. Are you familiar with that? Have you heard that name before?
What's the name again? Mark what?
Mark Kilroy.
Mark Kilroy. Interesting last name. But no, I haven't heard it before.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to start off with showing you a few pictures of Mark.
All right, let's take a look at Mark.
So here he is. These are some yearbook photos.
Okay, so this is a little bit back in time.
This is a little bit older. So this case will take place in the year 1989.
He's a good-looking, classic American college boy.
All
he has
American.
A mullet. Okay.
He has a glorious mullet.
He has a glorious mullet, but he looks like I would imagine any man going to college in the late 80s.
He's like the boy next door.
Boy next door. Perfect. Yep.
Yeah. So that's Mark. He was born on March 15th of 1968 in Chicago, Illinois, to his parents Jim and Helen Kilroy. Shortly after his birth, his family actually moves to Santa Fe, Texas, which is a small town in the Houston area.
Okay.
So growing up, Mark is very active in his church. His family, they are very devout Catholics. When he was younger, he was also a Boy Scout, and he loved Boy Scouts. He was very active with that as well. And then in high school, he was an honor student as well as a star athlete. He was very popular, had a lot of friends. He was just an all-around good kid.
Okay.
He graduates from high school in 1986. Mark attends Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas.
Aw, boo.
So he quickly transfers to Texas A&M.
Oh, my God.
On a basketball scholarship.
Okay.
He makes a lot of friends there. He actually joins a fraternity. After a while, he decides that he no longer wants to pursue athletics. He really wants to focus on his academics, and he wants to study to become a doctor.
Okay.
So he transfers to the University of Texas at Austin as a pre-med student, and so he can prepare to take his MCAT, which is like the entry exam that you take before you go into med school. In March of 1989, Mark and some of his friends from Texas A&M decide that they are going to head down to South Padre Island for spring break.
Uh-oh.
It's a very popular spring break destination for college students all over the U.S. It's in the Gulf of Mexico. It's very southern Texas. It's actually very close to the Mexican border. There is a lot of nightlife. So Mark's friends, Bradley, Bill, and Brent, drive down from Texas A&M, and they stop through Austin to pick up Mark, and they embark on the 9-hour road trip down to South Padre. They arrive a little before midnight on March 10th and check into the Sheridan Hotel down there. So the first day that they're there, they are just hanging out at the beach. There are a bunch of people. There are kids from, again, all over the country here to party for spring break. There are like beer tents, a bunch of competitions, companies are there, like shooting commercials, the whole nine. So Mark and his friends are hanging out with a bunch of people. They're hanging out with some girls that are from Iowa, some girls from Indiana. They're essentially being frat boys on spring break. Like, you can imagine what they're doing. So at some point during the day, they go to this competition called Miss Tan Line, where girls are competing for who has the best tan line. That was a real big thing in the 80s.
The best tan line.
Or just having tan lines was a thing.
Okay.
So they meet up with a group of girls who were in the competition, and they are from the University of Kansas. And these girls actually invite them to go across the border to Matamoros, Mexico. It is on the other side of Brownsville, Texas. So it's a border town.
And did these lady friends, did they win the competition or did they lose?
I don't know. It is not known.
Okay.
Anyways, they tag along to go party. So they arrive in Brownsville, they park their car, and then they cross the footbridge into Mexico. This is apparently like a pretty popular thing to do because there are tons of spring breakers that are doing this. Like there are crowds of them. So they end up partying at this club called Sergeant Pepper's, which is a really popular spot for American college students who are crossing over into the border.
Yeah.
And they have like an absolute blast. They're dancing, they're hanging out with the girls. They actually don't come back to South Padre until around 3 a.m.
Okay.
Next day, and this is now March 13th, Mark and his friends get up and they are like, man, last night was so much fun. Let's go back to Matamoros tonight. And so that is what they do. Around 10:30 that evening, they again park their car in Brownsville and cross the footbridge back into Matamoros, Mexico. However, this night, there are way more people than there were the night before. There are about 15,000 spring breakers in this small town.
Is this just the boys, or did they go back with the same group they went with the night before?
So it's just the boys, but the girls are going to be there. But at this point, it's just the boys that are going.
They're going to meet up with them potentially, but they're going there on their own. Got it.
They're going there on their own. As there are so many people, they decide to leave the main touristy area.
Yeah.
And they decide to hit up a few local bars that have some live music playing. So at around 2 a.m., one of Mark's friends decides that they should get going. They should head back to South Padre because bars are going to be closing in an hour. There are tons of people. It is going to be like a madhouse trying to get across this footbridge and trying to do the drive back to South Padre. So he's like, we need to get out of here. We should leave sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So they get ready to leave. They're looking for Mark, and they find him outside. He's leaning up against a car, and he's talking with one of the girls from the University of Kansas who was in that Miss Tan Line competition, and he's chatting her up. And they are waiting on him. They're waiting for him to wrap it up with her. And meanwhile, thousands of people are now leaving and going over the footbridge. They start to head back, but because of the sheer volume of people exiting at the same time, their group kind of keeps getting separated.
Right.
Okay? So his friends, Bradley and Brent, are together, and they're ahead of Mark and his friend Bill. So it's now the four boys are split up. There's two ahead and there's two behind.
Okay.
So Bradley and Brent, they're ahead of them, and they decide to wait at this store that's right by the footbridge, so that way the group can kind of cross together.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, Bill and Mark are kind of stuck behind, and it's congested, so they're waiting. And at some point, Bill is like, hey, I have to go pee. I'm going to go off into this alley. And he's like, wait here for me. He says that to Mark. And when he comes back, Mark is gone. And Bill is like, all right, maybe he ditched me. He left, and he's probably now caught up with the other guys.
Yeah.
So he takes off, and when he meets up with the other boys who are at the store, they haven't seen Mark either. So they start to look for him, and they're just kind of looking around, and they think, maybe he's already crossed into Brownsville, and he's waiting by the car for us. So they cross over the bridge, they get to the car, Mark isn't there. So then they decide to go back over the bridge and continue to look for Mark in Mexico, in Matamoros. They, again, looking around, they can't find him anywhere, they don't see him. And then they think, well, he was talking to that girl. Maybe he met up with her, crossed the bridge with her, went back to South Padre with her, and we're going to see him tomorrow. He's going to be really hungover and have some crazy story.
Yeah.
So they go back over the bridge, they get to their car, and they leave South Padre without Mark. The next day, there is still no sign of Mark. So they decide to report him missing. So I know I've thrown a lot of information at you, so I'm going to take a moment now to kind of check in. What are you thinking? What are you feeling?
It sounds like I've personally never gone to a beach on spring break, but just what you described, how, hanging out with the boys, we're having a good time, we're in a crowd of people, we get split up, I gotta go to the restroom, it's very real, I can feel it. And then I could see his friend, was it Brent? or the friend that was with them that went to go pee, being like, okay, well, he's probably, with the boys. I'll meet up with him. And I get like, okay, well, he's probably with that girl. So I definitely can feel how all of that can happen easily.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm super intrigued on where this is going and where Mark went, because that is super weird.
Well, let's find out. Oh, at first, they report him missing. And at first, the local authorities, they don't take the report too seriously. So a lot of spring breakers will like go missing and then turn up like a day or two later.
Yeah,
again,
I can
like
imagine.
hungover,
Right?
And they're like, man, like what happened? Like this is pretty common.
Super common. Yeah.
But time passes, and Mark's whereabouts remain unknown.
Like how much time?
So a couple of days. So this happened on March 13th. Mark's birthday is March 15th. So they think, and especially his parents, no matter what's going on with him, he'll call home.
Yeah.
He'll reach out, but he hasn't. So Mark's parents come down and they start searching for him. They post a reward. They hand out flyers. They do everything that they can do to try to find their son. So Mark's uncle works in like customs on the border. So that kind of garners a little bit more attention from that department. So in the following week, U.S. Border Patrol, local authorities, and the Mexican Federal Police are doing everything they can to investigate Mark's disappearance. He actually is featured on an episode of America's Most Wanted, urging viewers to call in if they have any information on his disappearance. So as time goes on, the authorities, explain to Mark's parents that they're no longer looking for Mark. They are looking for Mark's body. And they start to suspect that Mark may have been killed in either a robbery gone wrong or something kind of drug-related.
Okay.
So they began to search this area of the Rio Grande. That's a common spot for like bodies to be dumped.
Jeez.
So they are like dredging the river. They're checking the banks. They're looking, and they don't find anything. So on April 1st, Mexican Federal Police are doing a stakeout of a known drug checkpoint in Matamoros. So they're investigating something separate from Mark's disappearance.
Okay, got it.
They're doing this stakeout when a green pickup truck speeds through an intersection without stopping. They decide to follow this truck to a ranch outside of town called Santa Elena. So they discover that this ranch belongs to the nephew of a local drug lord, and they find considerable amounts of marijuana and other paraphernalia.
Okay.
So they take him into custody, as well as 4 other men who are just on the ranch. So while these guys are being interrogated, they are super, super calm. All right. They're no concern with these guys. So because this investigation with Mark is going on, and they think it could be drug related, they show a picture of him to these guys and ask if they've seen him. At first, they don't say anything. And finally, one of the guys is like, yeah, I've seen him. And they're like, where?
Interesting.
And he points to a shack that is on the property.
What?
So before we go any further, I'm going to introduce you to someone else. I'm going to introduce you to a man named Adolfo Constanzo. And I'm going to show you a couple pictures of him. So if you want to come over here.
Is this one of the guys from that ranch?
I can't reveal that to you yet.
It looks like a movie star.
Yeah. So this is like a modeling kind of headshot almost. He is a model.
He also has a mullet.
It is the late 80s.
Do you think I look good with a mullet?
Hell yeah, baby.
Hell yeah.
So Adolfo Constanzo was born in Miami in 1962 to Cuban-American parents. From a young age, his mother believed that he had psychic abilities, and she really convinced him of these skills. So after his father dies, and after his death, his mother remarries, and they move to Puerto Rico. Constanzo's stepfather was a drug dealer who practiced the occult. And through him, Constanzo is introduced to Afro-Caribbean religions, Santeria and Palo Mayombe. And he learns about animal sacrifices. So as an adult, he moves to Mexico City to pursue a modeling career. So he's a model. And he launches this business where he would sacrifice all sorts of animals. So birds, cats, dogs, even in one case a lion cub, to cast spells for his clients to give them luck with love, money, etc.
Okay, interesting.
Due to his magical performances, seemingly successful outcomes, and his physical attractiveness, he starts to gain followers and essentially forms a cult. So a lot of his clients were drug dealers. And because of this association, he becomes a drug dealer himself.
And by clients, you mean people that would go to his business?
People that would go to his business to seek his abilities. They
to sacrifice animals.
Sacrifice animals in the name of like casting a spell. Okay.
It's part of their religion, right?
It's part of their religion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Now he is a drug dealer / cult leader. Okay. So his thing is he will have his followers capture his rival dealers, sacrifice them, cook them, and eat their brains.
What?
He believes that this will give him and his followers this like invincibility.
Yeah, competitive advantage.
When it comes to law enforcement. So he thinks that when he does this ritual and he consumes the brains, they won't get caught. They will become essentially invisible to law enforcement.
Is he the only one eating the brains, or everybody in the cult?
He's the only one.
Oh, okay.
So he and his followers decide to leave Mexico City to move closer to the border to boost business. With this move, it becomes more difficult for them to fly under the radar of local authorities. So in the spring of 1989, Adolfo Constanzo and his followers are now living outside of Matamoros on the Santa Elena Ranch. And the drug enforcement officers are really starting to kind of close in on them. It's heating up. So he says to his followers, these local dealers are just not cutting it, okay? I need you to find me a white Anglo-Saxon male because I need a superior brain.
What?
This is what he believes. These are his words. He believes that if he can consume a brain like this, it will give him and his group this intense power over all other competitors. They will be completely invisible to the authorities, and they will become wealthy and prosperous.
Wow.
So on March 13th, his followers set off into town to find what he requires, what he's looking for. So at first they spot Mark when he is leaning up against the car talking to that girl. They decide that he fits the description. He appears to be strong. He's good looking. They're like, all right, this is him. So they watch him for a little while. And when Mark separates from his friend, when his friend steps into the alley, a group of Constanzo's followers call him over to their truck. And as he approaches, 2 other cult members come up behind him and throw him into the truck.
Dang.
So they drive off, but they stop for a moment. And Mark takes that moment and he actually breaks free and runs down the street. But he ends up being intercepted. He's stopped by another group of cult members who are in a car. And they force him into the back seat at gunpoint. And they head to the Santa Elena Ranch. They drug him and they leave him in the car overnight. The next day, on March 15th, which is his birthday, they wrap his head in duct tape and they lead him to a storage shed that's on the property. Throughout the night, Constanzo performs his sacrifice by torturing Mark, sexually assaulting him, and finally killing him by chopping the back of his neck with a machete. So they then boil his brain in a cauldron and prepare it for consumption. His body was dismembered and buried, but they attached a wire to his torso so they could pull his body up later, so they could make jewelry out of his bones, because Constanzo believed that he could hold some additional power if he wore his bones.
Okay.
So before we go any further, let's take a minute. How are you feeling? Where are you at right now?
Man, just thinking about him being captured, thrown into a car, having that moment to get away. You do get away. Now you're running down the road. It's the middle of the night. And then they catch you. Like, that literally sounds like a nightmare, like a movie, like a scary movie.
Yeah. It was difficult researching this case.
Yeah, that image or that moment is stuck in my head.
Horrible.
I can't imagine how scary that must feel. And
yeah, there are a lot of twists and turns with this one. So let's go back to April 1st. So the investigators have raided the ranch. They've apprehended these guys who are cult members, and they are talking. They're talking a lot. They think that because they have done this ritual, they are like untouchable. And that's just not true. So the Mexican federal police begin their investigation, and along with Mark's body, they find around 15 other bodies that had been murdered in a similar fashion on the ranch.
wow.
They also find the cauldron with remnants of human brain inside it, as well as various sacrificial instruments and copious amounts of narcotics. So now both U.S. and Mexican law enforcement are now looking for Adolfo Constanzo. And there is this international manhunt that ends up going on for a while. They end up catching up to him on May 6th in Mexico City. They find this apartment complex that he's been living in with a small group of his followers. And while they surround the building, Constanzo actually looks out the window, sees them, and he realizes that he is cornered. So he proceeds to light his money on fire. It's a ritual that will secure him riches in the afterlife. And he then turns to his followers and commands them to kill him because he cannot be captured. So at first they are hesitant, but eventually this man, who was Constanzo's right-hand man, ultimately shoots him to death with a machine gun. Police enter the apartment, and after a brief standoff, they apprehend around 7 cult members. They are tried for numerous charges, found guilty, and like bare minimum, they receive 30 years. I feel like they should have got way more, but the majority of them got around 30 years. So as for the aftermath, once Mark's body is recovered, his family holds a memorial for him at a Catholic church in Brownsville, Texas, and over 1,200 people attend to pay respect to Mark and his parents.
Mm.
So not long after his death, His parents start the Mark Kilroy Foundation, which promotes education and drug awareness, as well as substance abuse prevention for youth, for young people. They host and sponsor youth summer camps, as well as counseling for at-risk youths. And this is active. Like, this operation is still ongoing.
Still going.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So his parents were able to take this absolute tragedy and turn it into something remarkable that is helping like thousands of kids. And his parents are, oh gosh, like there was this one interview where, and this was during the trial when the cult members were on trial, and they said that they forgive them and they're praying for them that they go to heaven so they can meet Mark whenever they get there and apologize to him. And they know that Mark would forgive them, which I am like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So like, I cannot even imagine if this were my child, you'd need a lot more than spells, honey.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah. And with that is kind of the end of the road with this case.
Wow. I thought Mark was going to be the bad guy, but I should have known better because he's a Longhorn. And, no, that's crazy. But like you said, I'm happy that his parents turned it into a positive and they're doing right by their son's name. Super sad story. I'm sure that's every parent's worst nightmare.
Absolutely every parent's worst nightmare.
I mean,
you send your kid off on a trip, probably his first trip by himself, you know? And this is what happens. Like the worst possible, most unimaginable thing has happened.
Oh, yeah. Another wild ride.
Crazy.
Hey, what do you think about naming this episode Longhorn?
No, we are not going to name it Longhorn. I already have a name picked out.
Your names are never as cool as my names.
Whatever. Just do what I tell you.
All right. Until next time.
Okay, bye.